Hello with that, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, this is L24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky, Russia has begun the battle for the Donbass, for which it has long been preparing. Zion's entity carried out the first airstrike on Gaza Strip in months early Tuesday in response to a rocket fired from the Palestinian district after a weekend of violence around Al-Quds holy site. At least 6 people have been killed and 11 others wounded after 2 blasts hit a boys' school in Afghan's capital. A court in Pakistan has sentenced 6 people to death after convicting them for their roles in last year's vigilante killing of Sri Lanka's factory manager. Yemen's Houthi rebels have agreed to rid their ranks of child soldiers who have fought by the thousands during the country's 7 years of civil war. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday evening that the battle for eastern Ukraine has begun and that a very large part of the entire Russian army now focused on this offensive. The Donbass is important for Ukraine. The region is home to much of Ukraine's industrial wealth, including coal and steel. And it's worth mentioning that in the same region, Moscow-backed separatists have been fighting Ukrainian forces since 2014.
We can now confirm that Russian troops have started the battle for Donbass, which they have been preparing for a long time. A large part of the Russian army is now dedicated to this offensive. No matter how many Russian soldiers are brought here, we will fight. We will defend ourselves. We will do it daily. We won't give up anything Ukrainian. And we don't need what isn't ours.
President Putin has said that sanctions against Russia over its military operation in Ukraine have failed, despite a warning by the mayor of Moscow that a boycott by Western companies will lead to a surge in unemployment.
But now we can confidently declare that such policy with respect to Russia has failed. The strategy of economic blitzkrieg proved unsuccessful. Sanctions scored the goal of its initiator, mean rise in inflation, unemployment, and worsening the economic dynamic in the United States and Europe, decline in living standards for Europeans, and devaluation of the savings. Russia withstood the unprecedented pressure. The situation is stabilizing. Ruble exchange rate back to early February level and supported by strong balance of payments. As of the first quarter, surplus at the current account is about $58 billion, and it is a historic maximum.
The Ukrainian military announced Monday that it repelled 7 attacks by Russian forces in the past days and destroyed 37 military vehicles and 5 aircraft. The attacks were prevented in the direction of Luhansk and Donetsk, according to a statement from the armed forces of Ukraine.
In the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Ukraine's defenders repulsed 7 enemy attacks, destroyed 10 tanks, 18 armored units, and 8 vehicles, 1 artillery system, and a mortar unit. Ukraine's Air Force has hit 7 targets. They were for 1 plane for UAVs and 2 cruise missiles.
The capture of the city of Crimea may have indicated the start of widely anticipated major Russian offensive in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, as fierce fighting raged in neighboring Robizen. Usamayati.
3 days of fighting and enraged battles on Rubizhne in the eastern Ukraine resulted in the fall of Crimea to the Russians. The Russian army has advanced one step towards Kramatorsk, the Ukrainian capital of Donbass, one of Moscow's first targets in the beginning of the military operation.
We can now confirm that Russian troops have begun the battle for the Donbass, which they have been preparing for a long time.
The city of Robizhne lived a fierce night animated by the heavy shelling of the Russian military, which worsened the situation and put the city in the position of front line. A group of desperate women live less than 2 kilometers from the town of Robizhne. Today they can hear the sound of shelling. Their area is not directly attacked. However, they still have fears that at any moment they can witness the worst scenario and the most dangerous experience of their lives, which they have already witnessed during the beginning of the military operation in the region.
The children left and the Ukrainian army put the tank here. As soon as the tank left, Russia hit the house. The tank was there. Ukrainians lived here. Everything was bombed here. It's not clear. We don't even know where it's coming from. We're waiting for the shots to come from there, thinking that the Ukrainian army will save us. But the arrival comes from there. There is shelling from all directions. We were left penniless. No gas, no electricity. There is nothing, no water.
Robizhne, which had more than 60,000 residents before the war began, came under intense Ukrainian artillery and mortar fire. On Monday, in addition to powerful explosions giving off plumes of white and black smoke, could be seen and heard hitting Robizhne from a slag heap near the former mining city. Sporadic heavy machine gun fire was also audible.
The United States is seeking to seize a super yacht suspected of belonging to a Russian oligarch that is docked in the Pacific island nation of Fiji, according to an application for warning order filed on Tuesday by Fiji's public prosecutor. The luxury vessel, Amadea, is widely believed to be owned by Russian oligarch Sulaiman Karimov, sanctioned by the United States and European Union. Russian air forces carried out in the morning a strike with high-precision missiles against a logistics center of Ukrainian armed forces near Lviv, according to the spokesman of the Russian Military of Defense, Igor Kushankov.
In the morning of 18th April, high-precision air-to-ground missiles from the Russian Aerospace Forces hit the 124th Joint Logistics Support Center of the Ukrainian Troops Logistic Forces Command in the Lviv region. The logistics center and large quantities of foreign armaments delivered to Ukraine during the last 6 days by the United States and European countries, which were stored there, were destroyed.
Swiss President Ignacio Cassis and the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met in Tokyo on Monday. The Swiss President repeated that Switzerland has joined the international community in implementing tough sanctions against Russia and repeated that his country will maintain its neutrality.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine is a unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force, creating a serious situation that shakes the foundations not only of Europe, but also of the international order that also covers Asia. Switzerland and Japan share the same values. I would like to emphasize that Switzerland strongly criticizes the war, and we call on Russia to stop the war immediately.
President Volodymyr Zelensky presented Matti Masikas, head of the EU delegation to Ukraine, with a completed questionnaire for obtaining EU candidate nation status. According to Zelensky's, Ukraine's journey toward the EU is occurring at a horrible time when many Ukrainians who proclaim European principles are losing their lives.
We understand that this is an official step for Ukraine on the road to the EU. We understand that our people have felt part of Europe for a long time. We think we can get support and become a candidate. After that, the next and final step will begin. We firmly believe that this process will take place in the coming weeks and that it will be positive for the history of our people.
The spokeswoman for the White House, Jen Psaki, reacts to the cancellation by the federal judge of the obligation to wear masks on public transport. She states that it is obviously a disappointing decision and adds that the CDC continues to recommend wearing a mask in public transport.
No more bunny business, that's the line. We would not outline from here. So this is obviously a disappointing decision. The CDC continues recommending wearing a mask in public transit. As you know, this just came out this afternoon. So right now, the Department of Homeland Security, who would be implementing, and the CDC are reviewing the decision. And of course, the Department of Justice would make any determinations about litigation. There's no plans for the president to go, so let me just reiterate that. But we would not outline from here or anywhere from the government who, if, and when for security reasons. So we wouldn't have any details to preview regardless.
The UN Security Council will convene an emergency closed-door session Tuesday to discuss recent unrest in Al-Quds. The meeting was requested by Europeans, China and UAE amid calls for calm and against dangerous Zionist escalation on Al-Quds region. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price says that the United States is deeply concerned about the recent violence in Al-Quds. Let's have a listen.
Question, in short, we are deeply concerned. We are deeply concerned by the recent violence in Jerusalem on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount and across the West Bank. We, as we did on Friday, continue to call on all sides to exercise restraint, to avoid provocative actions and rhetoric, and preserve the historic status quo on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount. We also continue to urge Israeli and Palestinian officials to work cooperatively to lower tensions and ensure the safety of everyone.
The Zionist military forces carried out the first airstrikes in months on Gaza Strip early Tuesday in a retaliation for a rocket fire from the Palestinian enclave, a sign that local tensions shows no sign of easing after a weekend of violence at Al holy place of Al-Quds, where Zionist colonizers clashed with local citizens of the region. Police in Afghanistan said 2 explosions hit a boys' school in Kabul neighborhood on Tuesday. Police initially reported 3 explosive devices. Afghan authorities have reported 6 victims, and the death toll could still rise. Witnesses said the blast occurred as students were leaving class in the morning. Six men are facing the death penalty in Pakistan, with dozens more facing prison terms ranging from the years to life. After the brutal mob murder last December of Sri Lanka factory manager suspected of violation, the anti-terrorism court in Lahore, set up inside the high-security prison, also gave life sentences to 9 people. Morabdeo.
Today is a very good day. In this case of international importance, justice has prevailed against the defendant, who took an innocent life. We hope that the elements who spread extremism in the name of religion will be addressed by law in the future.
Yemen's Houthi rebels have agreed to rid their ranks of child soldiers who have fought by the thousands during the country's 7 years of civil war. The Houthis signed what the UN described as an action plan to prevent recruiting or using children in an armed conflict, killing or maiming children, and attacking schools and hospitals. Yemeni Prime Minister Moamin Abdul Malik Saeed met with members of his government in the southern city of Aden, where the newly formed Leadership Council will take the constitutional vote during a session of parliament. The 8-member Leadership Council, headed by Rashid Al-Alimi, is tasked with leading the country after the resignation of President Abdurrabbu Mansour earlier this month. China says it has signed a vast security agreement with the Solomon Islands at a time when several Western countries, led by the United States, lend Beijing military ambitions in the Pacific. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Wenbin announced.
The foreign ministers of China and the Solomon Islands recently officially signed the Security Cooperation Framework Agreement. I have not heard that the Chinese foreign minister has visited the islands of Solomon.
Refugees in Tunis, the capital, protested in front of the UN office for refugees on Monday, demanding for the office to evacuate them from Tunisia to another different country after they said they have been experiencing violence and mistreatment. Islam Seed has more to tell.
An emblem attached at the entrance of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees office saying we need evacuation. Loads of African refugees took part on Monday for the third day in a row in a sit-in outside the UN office in Tunis, calling for evacuation to other countries.
The real problem is with the UN Commission because it has abandoned its main role of protecting us, and instead of doing that, they have left us out of the street. We lived in Jaris, and the UN Commission demanded our evacuation, cut all funds, and stop protecting us.
These African refugees who spent the night on boxes spread out on the ground and covering themselves with blankets have been holding a sit-in since Saturday in the Tunisian capital. Migrants and refugees from sub-Saharan Africa and Tunisia regularly complain of being victims of verbal and physical violence in the country.
We want evacuation. We want to be evacuated from this country. We have experienced racism in coffee shops. We have been assaulted in our homes. We just want to be evacuated from this country.
Most of these migrants are mainly survivors of failed efforts to enter Europe illegally by sea. According to the Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights, the Tunisian Coast Guard stopped more than 25,000 migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean in 2021, almost double the number caught yesteryear.
After closing down many other facilities due to demonstrations and political opposition, Libya's national oil company has suspended operation at two significant oil sites, the Zwitna terminal and the Sharara field. The groups occupying the oil sites are calling for a fair sharing of incomes as well as the handover of executive control to Mr. Bashaga. In a statement, the NOC expressed concern for the beginning of a painful wave of closures of oil facilities at a time when oil and gas prices are surging on international markets as a result of the conflict in Ukraine. Sri Lanka's embattled president announced 17 new ministerial appointments on Monday and expressed regrets for his government's handing off a devastating economic crisis that had led to widespread protests. More insights with Miriam Zian.
Sri Lanka's president admitted Monday that he made mistakes that contributed to the country's worst economic crisis in decades and promised to make changes.
I think we should have gone to the IMF a lot earlier. Not supplying farmers with agrochemicals is also a mistake. We will again supply fertilizers to our farmers. People are suffering because of the economic crisis, and I deeply regret.
On Monday, the president of Sri Lanka is suffering a historic economic crisis introduced in new administration, but tens of thousands of people continue to demonstrate in Colombo, the capital, demanding that the Rajapaksa cede power. People have faced months of food, gasoline, and medical shortages, queuing for hours to purchase extremely limited supplies available.
You can see how many people gathered here. They are shouting they need. We don't have fuel here. We don't have gas here. Now the medical supplies are very low and the food very low. Luckily, few of the countries in the world, especially India, China, few countries, they are helping us. That's true. But I don't know what will happen next.
The South Asian island country is on the edge of bankruptcy with roughly $7 billion in foreign debt due to be repaid this year. Colombo is approaching the lender for the 17th time, requesting $3 billion in the next months from a variety of sources, including the IMF, the World Bank, India, and China, to stave off the catastrophe. After reaching for help from different sources, will the country move on, or will it return to square one in a vicious spiral?
Peruvian President Pedro Castillo said on Saturday that his government is willing to impose a mandatory chemical castration against rapists who destroy lives of families and their children and pledged to take tough procedures against these crimes. This action proposed by the head of state still needs to be approved by the Peruvian parliament.
We propose to impose chemical castration as one of the drastic measures against rapists of minors, teenagers and women. This proposal will be formalized in the coming days, and we hope the support of the Parliament and does not turn its back to this decision.
The Mexican President López Obrador accused the opposition of going against the interests of Mexico by rejecting his electricity reform. The reform was aimed at reaffirming the role of state in the management of electrical energy. Nabil Khazini.
In a blow to President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Mexican lawmakers rejected planned constitutional electricity reforms aimed at strengthening the role of the country in the production of electrical energy. The Mexican head of state slammed opposition legislators for voting down his flagship project and called it an act of treason against Mexico. A two-thirds majority was needed to amend the constitution.
Yesterday, a group of legislators committed an act of treason toward Mexico. Instead of defending the interests of the people, of the nation, instead of defending the public sector, they openly defended foreign firms.
The plan would have allowed the Mexican state-owned Federal Electricity Commission to possess at least 54% of the electricity market. Changes the government says are needed to prevent soaring power prices in the country.
We would like the rules of the game to be clear. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission not to disappear. Because if there is no regulator that sets the rules of the game, the uncertainty will delay or cancel projects, cause foreign investors not to come to Mexico to invest and no more jobs to be created. It would be ideal for the reform to pass, with changes intended to clarify the role of renewable energies in Mexico.
Washington has warned that the approval of the reform could cause endless litigation under the Mexico-United States-Canada Free Trade Agreement, something that would hamper investment and impede joint efforts to fight climate change.
The South African National Defence Force has been called up to assist in the cleanup operations on the country's flood-ravaged East Coast. At least 443 people have died and 63 others are missing after the deadliest storm and record rain down on the city of Durban and the surrounding area of KwaZulu-Natal province. Zara Farjani has more details to be explained.
During emergency rescue operations, search and rescue teams as well as police and South African K9 units have been called up to search for a missing person believed to have been caught in the flood north of Durban, a week after unprecedented rains began to hit the city and province of KwaZulu-Natal with a death toll at 443. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa declared a state of national disaster after the devastating floods hit the East Coast.
It is clear that there are other areas of the country that need emergency intervention as well. Cabinet met in a special session last night and decided to declare a national state of disaster.
A week after the start of bad weather in South Africa, residents of Durban on the east coast were still without water or electricity on Monday. The army deployed 10,000 soldiers to assist in relief.
As government, we will make financial resources available to meet this challenge. The Minister of Finance has said that a 1 billion rand amount is immediately available.
President Ramaphosa has also called for more measures to adapt to the effects of climate change.
These floods are a tragic reminder of the increasing frequency of extreme weather conditions as a result of climate change. We need to increase our investment in climate adaptation measures to better safeguard communities against the effects of climate change.
Blue skies finally reappeared Monday, giving hope that the rains have at last decreased, but the normal waters at Durban's famed beaches have been turned a muddy brown by the mountains of earth and wreckage washed to the shore.
US President Joe Biden and his wife Jill hosted 30,000 kids and adults for the first White House Easter egg roll since the start of the pandemic. The head of the US briefly addressed the crowd with the First Lady, kicked off egg roll races and took selfies on the South Lawn. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself and have a blessed evening.